corner. And Lane looked at Callaghan. See if Callaghan could come up with anything. But Callaghan was just as empty as Lane. So Glendora appealed. The clerk would not submit the record on appeal without the $1,300 minutes. The appellate term never reads the minutes anyway. They never read a transcript. You know, it's a whole hoax. So Glendora moved for the rich Rye Court to pay the $1,300. A shack in Rye, Westchester County, New York, a shack is selling for $600,000. That's the rich Rye Court. Lane's answer was a sissy cop-out. So Glendora did whatever the dumb thing he asked me to do, on his objection. And then I filed again for the rich Rye Court to pay for the transcript. And Lane's reply was porridge, with another dishwater objection. So Glendora overcame this, his objection, and moved again, third time, for the rich Rye Court to pay for the minutes. And his reply was a disgusting wimp. Well, I'd had enough of that, so I appealed those decisions. I appealed all of his orders denying my motion that the Rye Court pay for the minutes. And it was easy to do that because, you see, there were no minutes. There was no personal appearance in court. All there were my 3 motions and his 3 denials. So they were all a matter of record, original record. Well, appealing those 3 decisions, appealing those 3 orders, you cannot appeal a decision. Appealing those 3 orders gave me the opportunity to tell the appellate term that Peter Lane had defied the appellate term, and when the appellate term remanded the first case, that he just sniffed at him. And where does that stand now? Glendora versus Charles F. Dolan and Cablevision Systems Corporation. It's in the appellate term for the Supreme Court, State of New York. And its place, the lower court was Westchester County, Rye City Court. Now Callaghan did not appear, and he did not oppose. He did not defend, and he dropped into his usual modus operandi, which is default. So that's where it is now. We're waiting for a date to come for oral argument. And when that date comes, Glennie's going. And Callaghan cannot appear at oral argument. So I'll have all 3 judges to myself. Why can't he appear at the oral argument? Because he did not file a brief. And in the appellate term, you cannot do oral argument unless you submit a brief. So Callaghan is out. And when the collusion of Callaghan and Lane, that was so blatant, Glendora said to her friend George McDermott, who drove all the way up from Washington, D.C. to support me, George, I'm filing another Dolan lawsuit. Before this one was even over, because I could see what was going on. And that was a lawsuit, folks, in the Harrison Town Court. And that lawsuit was Glendora versus Charles F. Dolan, Cablevision Systems Corporation, James L. Dolan, his son, Matt Budil, Thomas Garger, Charles Former, Peggy Anderson, Christine Savarino, Cecilia Mastrorilli, Robert F. Callaghan, Robert M. Callaghy, and Sadly Stevens, Burke, and Patricia Langeli. That's the case that went to the Harrison Town Court. John Voach was the judge. Now, Voach was not the sick rye cheater that Peter Lane was in the rye court. Voach was just plain incompetent. He just didn't do his work. And he lost to Glendora by failing to rule on Glendora's motion within 60 days. By New York State civil practice laws and rules, a judge has 60 days to rule on a motion. If he doesn't rule on it, then the movement wins. So, John Voach lost to Glendora on that. And the case is also in the Second Department appellate term in the Supreme Court. Callaghy wrote exactly the same thing he Xeroxed for Glendora versus Bennett, and Glendora's fights for rights and pre-file. It is a broken record. It's a self-rewind, as we say in TV, an auto-rewind endless tape, isn't it? Glendora spent 27 hours refuting it last week, you remember, folks? And circa $50 distributing it. She told the story on TV, and it took 4 half hours, and on the internet, just as she has exposed the Peter Lane debauchery all over the world. Glendora went out to the Phillipstown court in manner alert and brisk and lively and nimble. Stephen G. Toman was improperly influenced and is now both in the appellate term and in the federal court in Idaho. And so is Callaghy in the federal court in Idaho. They both hired Idaho lawyers, and they both are in default. The justice sought in Rye, Harrison, Phillipstown, did not appear until August of the year 2005, when Glendora won a judgment of $5,020 in the White Plains City Court and sent the sheriff after the Callaghy conclave for garnishee of wages. And when I sent the sheriff after them, they put the money down. After 2 or 3 months of stalling and of fraud, and they put the money down, $5,000. They did not give it to me, but they put it in the White Plains court. Last week, Glendora moved the court in White Plains to give her the $5,020 instantly on the grounds that the appeal was a nullity. One cannot appeal anything but an order or a judgment. And they appealed a decision on a motion. So, you think we'll get the $5,000 at last? Callaghy's convolutions with orders to show cause why the August judgment should not be vacated cost Glendora severe time, dollars, and herbs of energy. His work was ignorant, repetitive, and hollow, so she sued him in White Plains City Court for another $5,000 damages. And this case is for all purposes being heard on May the 3rd. That's a couple of weeks. And Glendora sent the Columbia court 400 pages of everything that happened in the White Plains court on those 2 cases. The one I won and the one that's pending. And a fortiori, if he does the same thing in this court on Bennett Amato, he will be sued again. Well, he did the same thing, so he is being sued Monday. In 12 years, Glendora has spent, we're up to page 26 now, folks. out of 100. Glendora has spent 2,326 hours on Dolan trying to protect our public access rights from these American thieves. And Dolan wants to get rid of public access because it costs him money. He has to pay for it. And he wants our channel so that he can sell advertising on it. And Glendora has spent, over these past 12 years, against Dolan, protecting public access, $38,373. And she has a file of 27,519 pages, not counting last week's 60 pages, nor this week's blank pages. 92 volumes of Dolan Bad Record, 16 file drawers, 1,277 mailings, and 1,359 Dolan Callaghan lies. They're all on the record. Okay, we can take a break now. Oh wait. Did you hear about the man who was hauled into court because he didn't pay his bill at the donut shop? But what did they charge him with? Impersonating a police officer. And a wine truck collided with a truck carrying cheese, and it resulted in an instant fundraiser. And Molly Potter, who was a great crossword puzzle addict, wrote in her will, "I want to be buried 6 down and 3 across." Cablevision got a new conference table, and it's 9 feet wide, it's 30 feet long, and it will sleep 10. The little boy said he wanted to be a philanthropist when he grew up, and all the adults asked him why, and he says, they seem to have the money. Peter says there's only one thing that keeps him from being rich. Money. What's the difference between a Xerox machine and the flu? A Xerox machine makes sick families, and the flu... Okay. Now what do I do? You tell it to me. A Xerox machine makes facsimiles, and the flu makes sick families, of which I am one. A man's walking along the shore, he picks up a seashell, and he hears a voice that says, "Why aren't you working, you bum?" And it was his mother-in-law. Bill said he just came back from a half-year cruise, and his buddy says, "That's right, they sent him up the river for 6 months." And poor little Joni was trying to justify her boyfriend in front of her father, and she says, "Dad, he has only one fault." And Dad says, "Right, he's unbearable." Okay, I know that my advice is very, very good. When I give advice, nobody comes back for more. I'll see you in a bit, sweeties. He didn't make it. The little kitty died. Oh, we wanted to pull him through so bad. Poor little Rusty Morris. He died. He was only 8 days old. It's hard to understand. Let's hope his little brother makes it. Little brother's 8 days old. Harbinger. You hear that, .com? The little kitty died? About Peter Lane, folks. Lane had to prompt Callagy to invoke Title 47 of the United States Code, Section 555A, et sequitur, and it was wholly non sequitur. It did not apply at all. Glendora has the illicit prompt on paper where Peter Lane actually told the lawyer, just the way Peter Lane served the lawyer's motion to dismiss on me, so Peter Lane helped Callagy along with this, and it just didn't apply at all. It was just a dirty, cheap cop-up, and it's agonizing. But Lane's cheat is on the internet, achatwithglendora.com. Glendora sued Lane in several federal courts, and Peter Lane, the judge in the Rye City Court, never could find a defense for all that he did. Not avenged for Rye in the Harrison Court, nor the Phillipstown Court, Glendora was finally avenged in the White Plains City Court, and with $2,000 more. The maximum monetary jurisdiction in the Rye City Court was $3,000, but in White Plains it was $5,000. So now Callagy, through improper party chairman influence, got unstable de Blasi to say Glendora could not file any more actions within a year. De Blasi was publicly sanctioned by the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. Within the 2 years, he was scraped off the Westchester Supreme Court bench, and he took a job with high-flying Henry Miller. But within the quarter, he was abolished, and where he is today in this abyss, we know not. His equally unstable law clerk, Barry Schwersky, was declared by the Delaware Federal Court as an agent of Cablevision. Woo-hoo. Glendora is learning how to make a claim against these judges' bonds, and in their own hand, these judges have violated their oath to uphold the Constitution, and a claim against their bond will show the bonding company that they are a bad risk, and then these judges will not be bonded again, and therefore they can't be on the bench. So that's one thing I'm trying to learn how to do. Callagy was all ill-advised to eschew a defense on the merits. His ultra vires will not win him anything. He disinters these uglies ad nauseum, and then he cannot handle them. Now, an agile hypnotist is very careful not to surface anything from the subconscious, because most likely after you take something out of the subconscious, it can't be dealt with. So he shouldn't have done that, Callagy. He still owes Glendora $110 for an audio tape that he ordered, and he still hasn't paid the interest on the $350 that Glendora paid Dolan to appear in federal court to be examined pursuant to Rule 54 Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. But he finally had to come up with $5,020, and this is statutory interest at 9%. He usually invokes a decision by a federal judge who was dying and in dementia, and who ruled that Cablevision is not a cable TV operator. That man's name was Broderick. Glendora wants the court to ascertain if Callagy is being paid by us shareholders to write this paper. Now, Callagy says a copy of Glendora's important notice, Bennett Amato capitulate and return Glendora to prime time, wherein Glendora concedes that the 9 p.m. is better than the 10 p.m. and withdraws her claim to have her show aired, a cable cast at 10 p.m. is annexed here too as Exhibit E. Why? I've already given that to the court. I'll show you Callaghan's signature. You can say this for him as a pretty good signature. What does Callaghan have to say about it? Anybody knows that 9 p.m. is better than 10 p.m. 9 p.m. is smack in the middle of prime time. The 10 p.m. is good, but on the over edge of prime time, the outer edge of prime time. Nowhere, says Glendora, does Callaghan swear he's telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. This really is not much of an affidavit. Glendora feels like an 18th century composer writing variations on a theme. It's the same theme over and over again, and it's not a tenable theme. Okay, here we are up to Zeta. Glendora says Callaghan's next exhibit is Glendora's summons with notice and complaint. The summons with notice in personam service and affidavits of the same clinch Glendora's award of judgment by default. See her dispositive motion of March the 24th. That's a mistake, Lenny. Sorry, that's a mistake. It should be on March the 24th. Her complaint is verified and is the well-pleaded complaint. She would not change a word of it except 9 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. She incorporates it herein together with oral synopsis to Justice Judge Hummel, St. Patrick's Day, and as if fully stated herein. Their copy machine inserted it backwards, but that can be quickly realigned. It used to infuriate Federal Judge Bryant when lawyers tumbled their pagination. Point C is reserved. We're up to 80, and that's on page 30. Callaghan's next exhibit is Saurak's one-liner answer. Glendora Cuisinarted that on February 27th, 06, and included 400 pages of his incredible incompetence in the White Plains City Court, September 5th to February 6th. Glendora incorporates the same herein, as if fully stated herein. Okay. Next up is Callaghan's partial list of Glendora's fights for rights. Glendora has already addressed this Herculean work. Callaghan's trouble has always been he cannot distinguish between cause and effect. The multiplicity of lawsuits was secundus. The law-breaking was imprimor. Before Glendora sued Cablevision and made Glendora put her show back on TV, that's another case that Callaghan lost, there was but one case in the U.S. Code annotated under 531E, forbidden cable TV operator editorial control. Now it goes on and on. Glendora made law. Callaghan never has made law. It's too bad. He could have used his life for noblesse oblige. Next is Lane's profligacy, and Glendora has already dealt with his utter laxity of morals. Last exhibit is 2 copies of Glendora's important notice that she now has 9 p.m. Fridays for the rest of her life, and that of any successors. The law says first come, first serve, period. Not every 6 months. Glendora is jubilant. All things work for good to those who love God. Judge Justice Hummel asked Glendora on March the 17th, how long, excuse me folks, do you need to answer the motions. And Glendora knew the reply to be, it depends upon how many lies they tell. But she reserved and revised with, it depends on how truthful he is. Now, this is the 9th hour, the 4th day, April the 11th, Tuesday. Glendora did not receive it until April the 7th, Friday, in the middle of videotaping, putting words on the screen, 12 hours, making 8 dubs of 12 editions, which is 10 hours, and wrapping 80 videotapes to send to the TV stations, and that takes 12 hours. She could not start it until yesterday, April the 10th, and every other hour of the day she works on it, after alternating other life with it. Callagee does not include Glendora's post-conference memorandum served on him the same day, and the 9 p.m. notice and the dispository motion for default. Callagee does not defend against Glendora's motion for default judgment. Return date was yesterday, April 10th. The default is indisputable. Glendora starts her refutation of Callagee's memorandum of lawlessness. He calls it a memorandum of laws, or a memorandum of lawlessness. So this is what he's asking for: to dismiss my complaint and or a summary judgment. To an order barring Glendora from filing any more lawsuits in this court in opposition to a motion for default judgment. Well, it really doesn't rise to an opposition. Glendora says Callagee did not ask for this relief in his notice of motion, ergo the relief cannot be considered by this court. Callagee wrote a notice of motion, and he didn't list the relief that he was asking for was opposition to default judgment. So when he puts it in like this, it can't be considered by the court. Then Callagee goes on with frivolous. Well, Glendora's never filed a frivolous lawsuit in her life. You can't say that violations of first come, first served, non-discriminatory administration of public access, forbidden cable operator editorial control, and limit and prohibit of public access. You can hardly call that frivolous. And Callagee's lie number 24. He's up to 24 lies, folks, and we're on page 34. And Glendora does not start these things. It is, in this case, it's Bennett and Amaya. Cablevision's law breaking starts it. And then Callagee's lying is next. It is the defendants who harass, taking Glendora's show off of TV in Nassau, in Harrison, Port Chester, Yorktown, Yonkers, New Rochelle, Pelham, changing Glendora's time slot where the audience she built can't find her anymore, censoring her show, crushing her tapes, cutting her show from 2 hours to a half an hour, not returning her show, harassing her signers 5 or 6 times a year. All Glendora does is stand up for her public access rights, mandated by Congress, the New York State Legislature, and the municipal franchises. This is a big lie that Callagee tells. He must be sanctioned pursuant to the New York analog to Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 11. Frivolously? What is frivolous are these papers that Callagee writes. Somehow, he says, well, maybe he can get somebody to explain it to him. He can't understand that 5 times as many people watch TV at 10 p.m. as do at 4 p.m. You can understand that. These are Calighi lies 26 and 27. This is not respectfully submitted. You do not respectfully submit a paper to a court when you lie. And Glendora says, poor Calighi, he does not know the law. The law is first come, first served. It is 9 New York Code Rules and Regulations 595.4, which has been changed to 19 New York Code Rules and Regulations at 895.4. The law is in every municipal franchise. To anybody but play dumb Calighi, 5 times as many people watch TV at 10 p.m. as do at 4 p.m. Don't think balls. We're up to page 37. Who is damaging whom? Who is harassing whom? Quote, random selection is a euphemism for lottery against the law in the state of New York. Calighi is misrepresenting, and it's number 28. This statement by Calighi exhibits mental incompetence. It is an obtuse thing to say. Obtuse abuse. He abuses the courts. That's why he's getting sued by me. Calighi is loath to identify the person who signed the law clerk's pebble. His name is Arthur D. Spatt. Glendora has sued Arthur D. Spatt in Providence Federal Court and is suing him again sometime this month. Burness versus Cablevision asked for an order to show cause why Cablevision lotteries should not be enjoined. Spatt held a conference in his courtroom with Burness there and many others, and Spatt impulsively called Cablevision's in-house lawyer, Charles Former, on the phone, and Spatt said, "How's your father?" Spatt said to Cablevision's in-house lawyer, "How's your father?" Throughout the litigation, Spatt's prejudice for Cablevision was abundantly clear. Spatt's law clerk, who wrote this rubbish, is Jeffrey Amato, and a relative of Glendora's defendant, Alyssa Amato. And when Kelly Burness put it straight to Spatt, what was the relationship between his law clerk, Jeffrey Amato, and Cablevision's public access coordinator, Alyssa Amato? Spatt dodged it pitifully. Promiscuously, Calighi does not tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. These are sanctionable omissions under Rule 11, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Now we're up to Calighi's 30 lie. We all know that the New York State Public Service Commission has been wined and dined by the New York State Cable TV Operators Association for years. The lobbyists stay right next door to Flynn and his abettors. As a result, Calighi says, is a lie. It is prima facie, first come, first served, is violated by a lottery and by changing time slots every 6 months. Why did they do it anyway? Glendora has sued Flynn and his accessories before and after the fact in Idaho, where they are unable to come up with a defense, and like Calighi, are in default. It was William Finneran of Greenburgh, Westchester, former chairman of the New York State Cable Television Commission, who said, "We appreciate what Glendora has done. She has proved our laws for us." Like all sites, Caligee's sites are just as many pros as there are cons. These lawyers go into the law books and find this case, and this case, where this judge ruled this and this and this. It's nothing more than another bad decision by a bad judge. And for every case that is for you, there is a case that's against you. So it all washes out. This abhorrent rhetoric in the New York State Public Service Commission is on appeal in the Second Circuit in Manhattan by Burners. Caligee does not tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. Caligee is supposed to tell you what a case he quotes. He did not, and this is more of his harassing, quote, quote, frivolous, quote, quote, and devious behavior. Caligee does not list the laws, and where are the preclusions. We're on page 40. No statutory authority is cited. It's a bold statement, and it's conclusory. Apparently, Caligee says, well, listen, we're not interested in apparently. This is a court of law. We're interested in two things, facts or law. We're not interested in apparently. Glendora sued them for damages for violating her public access rights. Caligee could never discern cause and effect. The harass begins with these rights violators, these rights feasors. The lawsuits are not the cause, they are the effect. Quote, quote, harass and quote, quote, frivolous are so overworked by Caligee that they have become platitudes and no longer have any meaning. I wrote on this paper every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for about six hours a day. His technological knowledge is as bad as his legal knowledge. He thinks that Cablevision airs. It does not. It cablecasts. How is it that Caligee had to pay Glendora $5,020 in White Plains City Court in February if, as he claims, Glendora cannot be reimbursed for her damages in cable TV? Unabashedly, he says, the statutes and regulations cited in her complaint provide no basis for a recovery of damages. White Plains Court didn't think so. They recovered my damages with $5,020. So Caligee's up to his line number 40. Caligee states no viable defense. Accordingly is non sequitur, as is all of Caligee's has written. And Caligee has shown no reason that Glendora should be restrained. And this is Glendora's first case in this court. Why should she be enjoined from filing any other cases? On the 11th hour of this Caligee rambling, conclusory, frivolous, harassing, circumlocution, Glendora is still on the watch, prompt, vigilant, wide awake, and ready. Tell me, court, do you see any cognizable defense yet? We have to stop now, court, and deal with a Caligee disjointed footnote, a product of his disjointed thinking. He should write an integrated paper, but he can't do that. That takes integrity. And guess what's in this footnote? His defense against a motion for default judgment. A big thing like that, which wins a whole case for Glendora, he puts in a footnote? And Okay, this is Glendora versus Diane Bennett and Alyssa Amato, Cablevision, Nassau County. Dropped the chat with Glendora from 10 p.m. in the evening to 4 p.m. in the evening. 5 times as many people watch television at 10 p.m. as they do at 4 p.m. So they cut my audience 4/5. This is forbidden editorial control, limiting and prohibiting. Cablevision public access shall be administered on a non-discriminatory basis, and it is also violation of first come, first serve. I came to that TV station in 1993. That's when I was first served. The time slot 10 p.m. Fridays. It cannot be given to a second come. And so I sued them for $23,000 in the Supreme Court, County of Columbia, State of New York. Their liar for hire, Robert M. Callaghy and Sally Stevens Birkenberg, has caused me to write 100 pages to refute his lies, his non sequiturs, his misrepresentations, his frivolous statements and vexatious statements. And we have been reading this for days, and now here it is on page 42, and I believe this is the third half hour. On the 11th hour of this Callaghy rambling, conclusory, frivolous, harassing, circumlocution, Glendora is still on the watch, prompt, vigilant, wide awake, and ready. Tell me, court, do you see any cognizable defense yet? We have to stop now, court, and deal with a Callaghy disjointed footnote, a product of his disjointed thinking. He should write an integrated paper, but that takes integrity. Guess what he put in this footnote? His defense for motion by default. Well, it's clearly, default judgment is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. It's a matter of arithmetic. The complaint was written on December 6th. It was served in personam on Diane Bennett on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, and upon Alyssa Amato by Kelly Burness, witnessed by James Burness. And they were given 20 days in the summons with notice to answer, and told that if they didn't, judgment by default would be taken against them. Guess when they answered? What's 20 days from Christmas? Approximately the middle of January, right? When did they answer? The middle of February. Default is a matter of arithmetic. And that's what I'm telling the court. And it is so silly for him to put his defense against that. And he has no defense against it. He says that because when we were at the conference, that Judge Hummel went ahead and made a scheduling order when they could make a motion to dismiss, and he thinks that precluded me from a motion for default judgment. Hummel didn't know about the default judgment at that time. What law says a scheduling order waives a motion for default? What is the statutory authority? It is really comical to try to defend against default in a footnote. C.E. A meritorious defense yet, court? Callaghy has not dealt with the law. No cable operator shall limit nor prohibit public access. This Public Service Law, Article 1, Section 2, 29C. Prima facie, 10 p.m. to 4 p.m. is limiting a chat with Glendora. Prima facie, it prohibits 4/5 of her audience from seeing it. 5 times as many people watch TV at 10 p.m. as do at 5 p.m. Ask any time salesman, and Glendora is such, what the Nielsen ratings say, and they will tell you. Regardless of Callaghan's wild, rhetorical, conclusory claim, Glendora did not waive right to default judgment, and Justice Hummel did not preclude default by having a scheduling conference. Glendora wants a meritorious defense somewhere in this Callaghan ambage. She ardently and arduously protests everything he has written, and he is going to pay for putting her through this unnecessary, cheesy cheat. Callaghan's nullity response to default judgment really is not his fault. There is no defense for it. No lawyer could come up with a defense for it. It is unequivocal default, and he can do nothing about it. Callaghan's prolixity is something he is going to have to atone for. Glendora is weary of his lies, his frivolous whining, his ignorance of the law, his conclusory void dodges inter alia. We are on page 47. She will never sue Cablevision again without suing him as a co-defendant, and Satterley Stevens, Burke and Burke as a co-defendant, so that neither he nor Satterley Stevens, Burke and Burke, the Cablevision liar for hire, can defend, because a co-defendant cannot defend a defendant, or put it better the other way, a defendant cannot defend a co-defendant. However, it is too late for Yonkers. Oh, you didn't know about that, did you? Well, Miss Christine Savarino has been sued in the Yonkers court. I assume by now she has her summons. The first court date is June the 7th at 1 p.m. in the Yonkers City Court. It's too late for Yonkers, because it took 2 months to file in Yonkers City Court. But Glendora will put Callaghan as a defendant and Satterley Stevens, Burke and Burke as a defendant in her next federal lawsuit, which will probably be filed the beginning of next week. Glendora has to find a way to get an injunction against Callaghan to pre-file and preclude his rambling 200 pages and shuck and no nib, together with discovery. Who is paying for this? It had better not be Cablevision. It had better not be we shareholders. And Carmody wait proof of authority to represent. His rumble about the default in a footnote is not legal size print, by the way. Further, he is short on toner. The words are too faint, as are his legal arguments. Cablevision, which has lost mightily to Glendora, is about to lose mightily to the telephone companies. The demise on Capitol Hill is foreboding. Do not be fooled. The telephone companies make us think it's TV into the homes they want. It is really the internet business that they want. But Glendora pronounces, professes, avouches, avows, and attests. Most of her viewers' response emanates from television, not the internet. That's true, folks. I hear more from you people who watch the TV than I do from you people who watch the internet. Once more under the breach, dear friends, once more. Callagy, page 3, Memorandum of Lawlessness, Statement of Lies. Callagy says, Glendora has made a practice of bringing lawsuits against numerous defendants. Well, whom else do you bring lawsuits against if you don't bring them against defendants? That was page 48. We're going to do 49, 50 out of 100, and then we're going to take a break. What he's saying is repetitive, vexatious, and a waste of scant judicial resources. It is bulk and no weight. Forgive poor Callagy. It is all that he knows. He is destitute for a meritorious defense. Indeed, nobody could find a meritorious defense for what Bennett and Amato have done. Question has been asked, and it has been answered. It is on Glendora's pages 15, 16, 17, and 18. Then he goes on to say how the United States Supreme Court wouldn't let me file any more poor persons complaints. Isn't that a great thing for America? The United States Supreme Court won't let you file in the court. Well, Kennedy dissented. And then Glendora went ahead and sued Rehnquist and all the others. Now, he repeats that about Glendora's many lawsuits and about the many decisions. And this is already on page 3, and it is a vain repetition of his pages in his so-called affidavit, and Glendora has answered. The answers are, how does Callagy telling the court about how many lawsuits Glendora has filed, how does that absolve Bennett and Amato from violating 4 public access laws? How is this a meritorious defense? What else is one to do when irresponsible people violate the law but to take them to court? What he writes is inflammatory, vexatious, ultra vires, and poor Callagy, alas, feel sorry for him, this is all he knows. And Christian F. Hummel is experienced and moral enough to know that if he, as judge, is influenced by this, he should recuse. A case not adjudicated on the merits can be brought again. Page 50. Did you hear about the man who was hauled into court for not paying his bill at a donut shop? What was he charged with? Impersonation of a police officer. This month's Clairvoyance Club will not meet due to unforeseen circumstances. And a wine truck collided with a truck carrying a load of cheese, and that resulted in an instant fundraiser. And Molly Dibble was a great crossword puzzle addict, and she put in her will that she wanted to be buried 6 down and 3 across. The company got a new conference table. It's 9 feet wide, it's 30 feet long, and it sleeps 10. Peter says there's only one thing that keeps him from being rich. What? Money. What's the difference between a Xerox machine and the flu? A Xerox machine makes facsimiles, and the flu makes sick families. A man was walking down the beach and he picked up a seashell and he put it to his ear, and the voice said, "Why aren't you working, you bum?" It was his mother-in-law. Peter was bragging that he'd just come back from a half-year cruise, and his buddy says, "That's right." They sent him up the river for 6 months. And poor little Betty was trying to defend her boyfriend before her father, and she said, "Dad, he has only one fault." And Dad says, "That's right, he's unbearable." Now, I know that I give good advice. My advice is very good. You know how I know that? Nobody ever comes back from war. So let's take a break, and we'll come back and do 25 more pages. Get us through this. Glendora now attacks Callaghan's page 4 out of 11. I'm going to try to read you pages 51 to 75 out of 100. And Callaghan says that Glendora adduces yet again that her public access rights have been violated. Now, he calls it a claim. It is much more than a claim. It is not an allegation. I adduced it. I proved it. I presented its fact, and I presented its law. And what was violated was that no cable operator shall limit or prohibit public access. And by dropping the program from 10 p.m. to 4 p.m., that certainly is limiting it. That's taking away 34,400 potential viewers. That's prima facie. It violates first come, first serve. The law says first come, first serve, period. It does not say first come, first serve every 6 months. Editorial control. The whole point of editorial control is to keep the viewer from hearing and seeing what the public access producer wants to present. When you cut the public access producer's audience by 4/5, what more editorial control can you have than that? And non-discriminatory. Why does Cablevision discriminate against me? Because I tell the truth about their unmerited rate increases. And I tell the truth, how they take all the money and put it in their pockets. And they go up and up on their rates, and you don't get anything more for it. And because I've exposed their terrible shareholder practices, they are not a public company by any means. They're a family-owned, controlled business. And the deceits and frauds that they have committed at what they call so-called annual meetings, and what they call so-called annual reports. So Cablevision discriminates against me any way they can. They will stop Glendora from telling you the truth, or from hearing it. I'll tell it to you, but they'll stop you from hearing it. Even if it did on the first postmark date, there are about 1,000 applications with that first postmark date. Now look at this, folks. They have 24 hours of time slots per day. You multiply that by 7 days per week, and you have, well, 24 hours multiplied by 2, because they're half-hour slots, we'll say. We won't deal with the others. They're anomalies. But if you have 24 hours a day of programming, and there's half-hour shows, so that's 48 hours a day. And they have 7 days a week. So that's 336 time slots is all they have. And yet they get 1,500 applications. Now their real problem is what? they need more public access channels. Their charge is to provide the public access to TV. So what's their real problem? And all of this other cheating emanates from that one thing. They're told to do public access and they don't do it. The issue is first come, first served. But Cablevision's real problem is they need to give us, I would say, 3 or more public access channels. And the franchises mandate that they do. They have to serve the public access demand. But they will not give up the revenue they get on those 2 other channels. And Callaghan goes on and tells about standing out in the cold all night to get a time slot. And I go on to tell you that it doesn't matter how Cablevision hands out time slots. The law still says first come, first served, period. It does not say first come, first served every 26 weeks. Okay. So Glendora invokes RICO, Racketeer Influence Crime Organization. This is a civil court that I'm in. The Supreme Court, County of Columbia, State of New York is a civil court. And I'm invoking RICO, Racketeer Influence Crime Organization, to give my judge, Christian F. Hummel, jurisdiction over their criminal acts. Number 1, a lottery. Number 2, mail fraud. Those are criminal acts. And of course, Callaghan is number 3, was his obstruction of justice. That's 18 U.S. Code 1505. And of course, it's criminal to misrepresent material fact. That's Criminal Code 18 U.S. Code Section 1001. So the civil court, I give them RICO, Racketeer Influence Crime Organization, so that they can deal with the criminal acts of Callaghan and Bennett and Amato. Glendora moves for sanctions. First went to Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 11, misrepresentation. How you doing, folks? Glendora moves for $50,000 penalty if her time slot is ever moved again. 9 p.m. Fridays is her time slot now, until she relinquishes it, or until her successor relinquishes it. This is an absurd thing to say, that Glendora's complaint should be dismissed because there's no cognizable cause of action. It's stupid. I've only cited 4 of them. First come, first serve, non-discriminatory, limit and prohibit, and editorial control. It's as bad as anything that comes from substance abuse. A person on substance abuse would talk like this. And it hurts Callaghan, and it hurts Bennett, and it hurts Amato. more than it hurts Glendora. Callaghan, Bennett, Amato have no meritorious defense under civil practice laws and rules 3211. Ergo, their flop of a motion to dismiss must be denied. Further, their prolixity and ambiguity and circumlocution is moot. Bennett and Amato are in irrefutable default. A copy of Glendora's paper, she is writing now, is going to Chairman Charles F. Dolan and Sun CEO James L. Dolan. Callaghan has piled up numerous defaults. He paid $5,020 for one in White Plains and must pay $23,000 for this one, plus costs and disbursements. And it costs $315 for Glendora to file this lawsuit in the Supreme Court, County of Columbia, State of New York. Summary judgment? No way. No way, Callaghan. And you know this very well, that a pro se civil rights case cannot be summarily dismissed. And here it is. Glendora versus Cablevision in 1995. Actually, it started in 94. My little kitty wants to come in. Here, you look at this, folks, while I let the kitty in. Okay, little kitty. You changed your mind? Kitty, 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 kitty. She makes a fool of me all day like that. She didn't want to come in. Now this is one of Glendora's many victories over Callaghan's rambling, conclusory circumlocutions. Again, pro se civil rights cases cannot be summarily dismissed. Glendora versus Cablevision. Substance abuse, Glendora says, or mental health, or fatigue, or incompetence. Cablevision is not a defendant. He keeps talking about Cablevision. The defendants are not Cablevision. They are Bennett and Amato, who worked for Cablevision. Let's try the kitty again. There. Why don't you come over here and say hello to the people? You have so many fans. Somebody was talking to you today, Stephen. Stephen in the post office was talking to you about you on TV. Here, let's go up and see the people nice and close. Let's see. Show your face to the people. Thank you. Oh, come on. Look at the people. What'd you do outdoors? She has a set pattern. When she's been outdoors, she wants to come in and eat. And she doesn't want any obstructions. So we're struggling through this, trying to get up to page 75. This is Callaghan's 55th lapse, misrepresentation, 18 U.S. Code Section 1001, and Rule of Sub 11, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. And what he starts to quote now here on page 60 really helps our case, folks, instead of his. Says Callaghan, pursuant to the Cable Act, any governmental entity empowered by federal, state, or local law to grant a franchise may provide a cable operator with the authorization to conduct or operate a cable system. The Cable Act permits franchising authorities, typically a local government or municipality, to require cable operators to provide public educational and government channel capacity on their systems. Local governments can require cable operators to set aside channels for PEG, that's for public educational or government access, use in exchange for, quote, permission to string their cables along the public right-of-way. Glendora says this is correct. Applaud Congress. Give Congress credit. Broadcast TV never did let the public have access to TV. And broadcast TV stole the public's airwaves and made billions on it. NBC, CBS, and ABC. Boo! And then Callaghan says that the Cable Act gave cable companies the right to make rules of operation as to the use of the channels they provided for public access. It's true they did, but not rules that violate first come, first served, limit and prohibit, non-discriminatory, and editorial control. Cablevision would not let Callaghan do an oral argument in Glendora versus Cablevision back in 1995 in the Second Circuit. Glendora brought the case in the United States District Court in White Plains. Bryant obviously colluded. In fact, he downright lied. Charles F. Bryant. And the Second Circuit remanded Bryant. They said, your decision is vacated, you do this case over. And the Second Circuit, well, first of all, they wouldn't let Callaghan do the oral argument. And guess what? They brought in a former chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Mark Fowler, to do the oral argument. But he lost. The Second Circuit remanded and told Bryant, the district judge, to do it over again. And Roger Minor, who was a circuit judge from up around Albany way, when Mark Fowler said, well, anyway, Mark Fowler made this statement, and Roger Minor said to him, surely, counsel, you're not suggesting that Glendora is obscene, are you? Anyway, Mark Fowler lost. Now, And simultaneously, Justice Donald S. Silverman, Supreme Court, County of Westchester, State of New York, ruled that plaintiff has a statutory right to be on TV and must be returned to TV. And Glendora says it is opportune here to insert the papers of another Glendora student, Kelly Bernass. And here is Arthur Spatz's dismissal of Kelly Bernass's case against Cablevision. And here is Kelly Bernass's appeal of it in the Second Circuit, Manhattan. And here is Kelly Bernass's attachment thereof. And it is very, very well written and very well thought out. And it's missing here, that's pretty bad. It's Arthur Spatz, well, then Kelly Bernass went ahead and sued the New York State Public Service Commission. Public Disservice Commission. And then Spat, in that case, she wanted the case to be in the Eastern District in Brooklyn and get away from Spat because obviously Spat is pro-Cablevision. How's your father? And Spat denied that. And so Kelly Bernass appealed that order. But the Second Circuit viewed it as an interlocutory order. And the case is proceeding before Spat now. Meantime, Spat dismissed Maroney versus Cablevision. With all these public access producers suing Cablevision, doesn't it tell you that something's wrong? Doesn't that tell you something? Flynn? And all your accessories before the fact and after the fact in the New York State Public Service Commission? Doesn't that tell? Of course it does. That's not even arguable. We all know it does. And we all know what you're doing. You're getting paid by the cable operators. Bennett and Amato limited and prohibited a chat with Glendora as to 34,400 potential viewers. This is severe discriminatory editorial control and violation of first come, first serve. Now where and when does Caligari apply these almighty laws? Caligari lie number 58. What is frivolous is this paper by Caligari. There is nothing frivolous about Glendora versus Bennett Amato. It's right down to the basic American. Public access TV. And forum, an electronic soapbox is what Congress called us. A forum in a public park, but it's on TV. Now Caligari says reassignment of Glendora's show to 4 p.m. on Fridays violates no state or federal law, and Glendora says this man will say anything for a buck. Reassignment, quote unquote, is an admission that Amato and Bennett violated editorial control, limit and prohibit non-discriminatory, and first come, first served. So there you are, folks. How we doing? We're up to 69 before we can go to bed again. Reassignment isn't euphemism. Reassignment is an adumbration, a vague disclosure, a shadowy representation. And it's misrepresentation number 61 by Callaghan. Callaghan would even try to defend Mephistopheles. St. Peter was challenged by the devil to a baseball game. And St. Peter said to the devil, I don't see how you can win. All the good players are up here. And the devil says, yeah, but all the umpires are down here. It was the Second Circuit who remanded a chat with Glendora to Charles Bryant to return her, or to return it to cable TV. And they did in Callaghan laws. He is quoting now in the Second Circuit Time Warner versus Bloomberg. And about the widest diversity of information to the public, and that is the whole gravamen of the Cable Act of 1984. I want you to know that you don't get the news. When you watch the 6 p.m. news and you watch Fox and you watch CNN, all of that is controlled. It's controlled by the international bankers. You are hearing only what they want you to hear. There's news and news and news going on that you don't hear because they don't want you to hear it. The only real news that you get is on public access. We are not controlled by the international bankers. We are poor people, impoverished people. But we say the truth, and we aren't afraid to say the truth. And nobody controls us. Glendora alleges that defendants exercise editorial control over her program. Well, I don't allege it, I adduce it. It is prima facie. There is nothing abstruse about this. What better way to keep Glendora's content getting to her audience than taking away 34,400 potential viewers? Now, what is content neutral? Content neutral? What smart aleck came up with this? Alopecia? We're on page 71. Get it straight, once and for all. Editorial control is any change that keeps the viewer from getting the message. The public access producer wants the viewer to get. You are the viewer. You are the person we are talking about. What is so difficult to comprehend about that? A change in channel is as a violative as is a change in time. It keeps the viewer from getting the message that the public access producer wants the viewer to get. It could not be more pellucid. Justice Judge Hummel, Glendora wants to tell you about Glendora versus Hofstetter. Some underling at Continental Cable, Peekskill, down to North White Plains, took a chat with Glendora off of TV every other Saturday in the year 1995. Glendora had just won her public access victory over Cablevision in federal district court in White Plains, and in the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, Westchester. The Glendora versus Hofstadter case was assigned to Barrington D. Parker. He came on the bench and intoned, "I have read the law, and it says first come, first served." So Glendora won. That underling at Continental Cable had no right to give Glendora's every other Saturday time slot to a second come. The program was on every Saturday, and so this underling gave every other one of those Saturdays to a second come. But then the improper influence slithered into his chambers. The telephones rang, the wheels ground. Parker did a volte-face. Here he was, ruling against Bryant. Here was a dichotomy in the courthouse at White Plains, from the second floor, mahogany, to the sixth floor, mahogany. Parker also violated 28 U.S. Code Section 636, handing over Glendora's case to an incompetent magistrate named Lisa Smith without Glendora's consent in writing. He trespassed with agility. He was awarded a chair on the Second Circuit, and he sits there today. The last I saw him was in an elevator on the 19th floor at 500 Pearl Street. And his eye contact, and he was so bewildered and so shocked when I got on the elevator. And his eye contact played back the betrayal, and he looked the other way. And Mark D. Fox did the same thing. Mark D. Fox is walking down the street this way. I am walking down the street this way. Our shoulders practically touch, and he looks straight ahead. He couldn't bear eye to eye. And that happened with Azraq, Joan Azraq. Actually, she betrayed Franklin and Glendora. And I went to her courthouse to make an application, to her courtroom to make an application. And when she finished with the three lawyers who were in front of her, who hid my view of her, when she finished with those three lawyers, she wouldn't look up. She put her head down and she turned this way, folks. And this is the way she walked down from the bench and into her chambers. She couldn't bear eye-to-eye contact. Anyway, Hofstadter lost in the end. He lost his cable company. It was gobbled up by AT&T. Now, Callaghan goes all over the place and he takes out these sound bites. And these sound bites by Callaghan have no import. They are taken out of context. They are not laws at all. And they are not made by Congress. And they are not made by the New York State Legislature. Anyhow, it is moot. Bennett and Amato are in default, just as unequivocally as Cecilia in White Plains, where Glendora was awarded the $5,020 judgment Callaghan had to pay. Why did you cite that case, Callaghan? Notice how carefully he eschews it. It is moot. Bennett and Amato are in default. And he goes on and on and on, never dealing with the real issue. What makes a default is arithmetic, not rhetoric. The complaint was written on December 6th. It was served by Kelly Bernass in personam upon Diane Bennett, upon Alyssa Amato. She walked right up to them and she said, "You are served." In personam service. Adamantine, impenetrable. And the complaint gave him 20 days to answer. And 20 days from December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, would be what? Generously, it would be, we'll say, the middle of January. When did they answer? The middle of February. Default is a matter of arithmetic. And then he quotes the case Glendora versus Marshall. Well, there is no such case as Glendora versus Marshall. Glendora never sued a case, Glendora versus Marshall. Glendora, the case was Glendora versus Malone. John Malone, head of TCI, Telecommunications Incorporated, who brutalized public access and got his retribution. He lost all of his cable companies. And Dolan's nemesis nears. Court, Glendora must know who is paying for these lies. Even though she has them on default judgment. And that all of this is moot. One must know if we shareholders are paying for it. 63 lies. Because if we are, Charles Dolan is liable for fiduciary irresponsibility to shareholders. Did you hear about the 3 ropes who were walking down the street? They went into a restaurant and they started ordering. And the head waiter says, "Aren't you ropes? We don't serve ropes in here. You'll have to leave." And out on the street, one rope was very, very angry. And he tied himself into a knot. And he tousled both of his ends. He went back into the restaurant and he's ordering. And the head waiter said, "Aren't you a rope?" And he said, "I'm afraid not." Well, everybody.com just went out again. With respect to New York, something or other, the Eastern District in Maroney refrained from considering whether the policies complies with the first come, first served. This is Arthur Spat and his badly influenced law clerk, Jeffrey Amato. And the reason they didn't rule on first come, first served is that they know that Cablevision violated it and the Public Service Commission violated it. This morning, Glendora finished printing 12 sets of her complaint. As to Spat, Maroney, and his law clerk, Jeffrey Amato. This is Arthur Spat in relation to Maroney. 2 defendants, Spat and Jeffrey Amato. And the hope is to serve the action next week. It was closed, but it had to be opened to admit Callaghy, Satterley as the last 2 defendants. Glendora will have to print 3 extra sets of these 76 pages, plus for her new federal law school. There are circa 22 defendants, and all the people who violated the law and her rights in the months since the action in the Idaho federal courts. The 3 sets go to the clerk, a courtesy copy to Glendora's new federal judge, and Glendora's copy. He said that the law changed up to, from 9 New York Code rules and regulations to 16. I think there's a typo in here. Glendora's failure to sustain a cause of action under the Cable Act. Well, there was no such failure, and this is Callaghan's Lie number 61, and this never happened. And her claims under New York Public Service Law, section 229(1), that no cable operator shall limit or prohibit, and Callaghan gives no grounds, and he gives no statutory authority, and it's moot anyhow because Bennett and Amato are in default. There again is no such case as Glendora versus Marshall. The case is Glendora versus John Malone, head of TCI, who brutalized public access and got his retribution. He lost all of his cable companies. And I say again, the nemesis for the Dolans is near at hand. Now Bernis has appealed Spat and his Jeffrey Amato law clerk for this pro-Cablevision prejudice. Glendora sued them in Providence federal court and is suing them again in her new federal court. How's your father? Spat, Jeffrey Amato had their choice, their option, their election, their preference, and they are accountable. That Bernis sued Cablevision and that Maroney sued Cablevision and that Glendora sued Bennett and Alyssa Amato shows this court that something must be illegal about their public access policy. Glendora's on 52 cable TV stations. Glendora's on 52 cable TV stations. Comcast, Time Warner, Charter, and nobody harasses us the way the Dolans do. Time Warner knows enough not to bother with renewals. Neither do Charter nor Comcast. But look at the mess Cablevision has to make of it. We sign up with Time Warner, send them the tapes, they cablecast them year after year in our own time slots, and send us back our tapes. Nobody is as hostile about public access as the Dolans. Not in 34 years has anybody harassed Glendora about public access as odiously as the Dolan lawbreakers. Comcast returns Glendora's tapes without being asked, sends them UPS in a padded folder, and pays for them. Bennett Amato will not do any of that. Cablevision is even dishonest enough to say that Glendora's tapes belong to her signers. Can you imagine anything more absurd? They ask as signers whether they can keep the tapes or use them for themselves. Now that is larceny. The tapes belong to Glendora. They lie, they cheat, and they steal. So the Public Service Commission has to pay up. They've taken Cablevision's money, so they have to deliver. And so they rule that Cablevision's lottery doesn't violate their rules. Now, how much did Flynn get paid for that? What else would we expect Spat and Amato to do? Remember, how is your father? Spat Amato also failed to deal with the lottery. They never even faced it or mentioned it. As did Flynn and his accessories at the New York State Public Disservice Commission. Now Callaghy is always saying accordingly. Well, it's non sequitur. Spat, Jeffrey Amato are being sued for this month. Spat and Jeffrey Amato are on appeal by Bernas in the Second Circuit. Flynn and the New York State Public Disservice Commission were sued in Idaho federal court. They have not appeared, they have not defended, and they are in default. Says Callaghy, in a bald-faced lie, no cause of action exists against Bennett or Amato individually. Well now, court, Glendora tells the Supreme Court, County of Columbia, State of New York, Christian F. Hummel. This is another Callaghy phantom. Another desperation, another frivolous excuse. The Westchester counterpart of Bennett Amato is one Cecilia Mastrorilli. Glendora sued Cecilia for the same violations of Glendora's public access rights. Cecilia kept chasing away Glendora's signers, and it cost time, dollars, and ergs to replace them. And Glendora won. And she won a $5,020 judgment against Cecilia, and Cablevision had to pay it, or Callaghy paid it. But anyway, they are out $5,000. Glendora sued Diane Bennett and Alyssa Amato at Cablevision, Nassau County, New York State, for dropping her program from 10 p.m. Friday nights to 4 p.m. Friday nights, which was a horrible violation of first come, first served. Glendora first came to Cablevision, Nassau County in 1993, and she was first served the time slot Fridays at 10 p.m. And that's what, 12 years ago. And so by doing this, they cut Glendora's TV audience by 4/5. And Glendora sued them in the Supreme Court, County of Columbia, State of New York. And both Bennett and Amato are in default. The summons with notice and complaint were served upon Bennett and Amato in personam by Kelly Bernas. She walked up to them and said, "You are served." Such service is impeccable. And they had 20 days to answer, and they were served 2 days before Christmas. And so 20 days to answer liberally would be January 16th. But they didn't answer until February 17th, so it's over. And Glendora has made her motion for default judgment. Callagee has failed to defend it. Who is Callagee? A liar for hire, Sadly Stevens, Burke & Burke, 230 Park Avenue, Manhattan. But I'm not so sure and that Callagee is being paid by Cablevision for this paper. He may be doing it as penance because he caused a default in White Plains City Court and lost $5,000. Cablevision or Callagee had to pay $5,000 into the White Plains City Court. And so Callagee does what he usually does after default. He makes a motion to dismiss. It's full of lies. He's already told something like 70 lies. And Glendora is going to sue him for that next week in federal court. And he goes after the case Glendora versus Cablevision, where Cablevision was ordered to put a chat with Glendora back on the TV. They took it off of TV because they didn't like what Glendora was saying about Thomas Galata, James Picken, and the Nassau County Commission on, or Department on Consumer Affairs, about Scott Lord running an underground lawn sprinkling business without a license and not protecting the consumers of Nassau County. Well, Glendora caught them in that in editorial control, which is forbidden by the laws, federal, state, and municipal. Well, that was a great case, Glendora versus Cablevision, in 1993, and instead of dealing with the gravamen of the case, which was Cablevision was defeated on editorial control, Callagee talks about private right of action. Now, what does that mean? That means that Glendora should have gone to the New York State Cable Commission or to the Federal Communications Commission to make her complaint. She shouldn't have gone directly to court herself. Well, this is a side issue, and the Second Circuit, United States Court of Appeals, Manhattan, ruled that Glendora had a private right of action and told the lower court, Charles F. Bryant, to say that. And so Charles F. Bryant had to make his decision over again and award Glendora a private right of action. But Callagee does this only to adumbrate. The real issue is that Cablevision lost on editorial control. They did it, they were caught at it, and they were punished. So this is on page 81 where Callagee goes off the deep end on editorial control and private right of action. And so Callagee says that no way does Cablevision ever have to pay for Glendora's damages. Well, they certainly do when they cause those damages. And Callagee can say this as many times as he wants to, but the case stands clear that Glendora was awarded damages in the White Plains City Court, damages that Cablevision caused. And that case was against Cecilia, who is the Westchester counterpart for Amato and Bennett. In Glendora versus Cablevision, that Glendora reproduced for the Justice Judge Hummel on page 59 herein, the Second Circuit ruled that Glendora does have a private right of action and remanded the case to Charles Bryant, Ossining native, to rule in Glendora's favor. He had to. Private right of action was settled for all time then and there. And Callagy is devious enough to eschew this. The Federal Communications Commission never opposed Glendora's proceeding, and the New York State Commission on Cable Television, before it was swallowed up by the nefarious New York State Public Disservice Commission, Pataki, did not oppose Glendora's proceeding. Indeed, its chairman at the time, William Finneran from Greenburgh, applauded it and said Glendora tested our laws for us. Glendora feels sorry for Callagy, spending a precious life, always seeking an angle, how to confront United States law and New York State law and municipal law. She feels sorry for him. Isn't that an awful way to spend your life? Poor Callagy continues to strive desperately, excruciatingly, racking, torturously himself, even if it means line number 73. The case that has been held is Glendora versus Cablevision, documented herein on page 59. The very case where Glendora defeated Callagy and Cablevision had to put Glendora back on TV. And it is all moot anyway because Bennett and Amato cannot escape their anguish. They chose default and its consequences. Section 531E writes, Callagy of the Cable Act provides in pertinent part that a cable operator shall not exercise any editorial control over any public, educational, governmental use of channel capacity provided pursuant to this section. Similarly, Section 229 of the New York Public Service Law provides in relevant part that no cable television company may prohibit or limit any program or class or type of program presented over a leased channel or any channel made available for public access or educational purposes. Lastly, 16 New York Code Rules and Regulations 895.4 states that channel, time, shall be scheduled on the public access channel by the entity responsible for the administration thereof on a first-come, first-served, non-discriminatory basis. Thank you, Callagy. That is our allodium. That is the public's allodium. Access to TV. Glendora is going to cut those out and sleep with them under her pillow. Accordingly, says Callagy, even if Glendora had a viable claim against Cablevision, which she does not, and this is line number, 85 or so? Well, it's page 84, so it's going to be in line about 75. Her claim is not properly brought against Cablevision's employees. Well, the city of White Plains, that court, said it was. And Callagy had to pay $5,000. So what has he got left to stand on? The Second Circuit, Roger Minor, says she does. The Federal District Judge Bryant said she does. Supreme Court Justice Donald Silverman said she does. Cablevision admitted she does and put her show back on TV in 1995. Callagy is lying, and it is his 74th. And these are all cases in which Callagy was Cablevision's liar for hire. And it is a moot, and it is all moot because M.S. Bennett and Amato directed their conduct to a 30-day default. Page 84. Glendora has to employ marginalia to keep count of Callagy's lies. Apparently, Callagy says, this paper has no room for apparently. Glendora believes that we are dealing with matters of fact and law. Apparently has no place. It's very hard to prove, intimidate. Callagy, he says that I brought the action to intimidate Bennett. Well, it's very hard to intimidate, and it's very hard to prove harass. But res ipsa loquitur, things speak for themselves. Who committed the first act of hostility? The lawsuit is not my fault. The lawsuit is their fault. They aggressed. They committed the first act of hostility. And Callagy has always had difficulty distinguishing cause and effect. And he also has difficulty with imprimor and secundus. Imprimor is lost by default judgment, and secundus is moot. It is obvious with ease who is being harassed and who is being intimidated. Glendora continues ardently and arduously to altercate the allodium of public access TV, and most likely don't know. It is such a dichotomy that Callagy knows the law, yet squanders his creativity circumventing it. So Callagy says Glendora has no right and should have sued Cablevision, and Glendora goes back and says, well, that's not what the White Plains City Court said when the White Plains City Court made Callagy pay Glendora $5,000. Callagy is fully aware of this, what I just told you, the White Plains City Court. It was another case of his that he lost. His cover-up of material fact is another criminal, 18 U.S. Code Section 1001. And he has lost his case by doing the unproductive alchemy that's he's doing in Glendora versus Bennett and Amato. Alchemy, you remember the medieval science where the objects were to change the baser metals into gold? Well, this is what he's doing. And to try to find the universal cure for diseases, and to find everlasting life. That was alchemy. Well, this is what Callagy is doing, alchemy. It's all futile. And anyway, it is moot. Default is over 45 days. Glendora has a right to the damages. Dolan, Cablevision, Budil, Gardner Former, Anderson, Savarino, Cecilia Callagy, Swarock, and Cablevision have caused her by harassing her and intimidating. Page 87. White Plains City Court proved Lane wrong. Callagy knows this and must be punished for misrepresentation of material fact under Criminal Code 18, U.S. Code Section 1001, misrepresenting. And Lane could have given Glendora only $3,000. White Plains gave Glendora $5,000. and Callagy has paid it. This court has already read the litany of Peter Lane depravity. Peter Lane is the city judge, Rye. And Bennett Amato are in default. It is over. What Callagy says after this fact is adiaphorous. Doesn't make any difference. Well, Glendora said differently. See her important notice to the court of March the 24th, 1 week after St. Patrick's Day conference, that she's going to keep the 9 p.m. slot. It's better than the 10 p.m. slot. And Callagy doesn't say why it should be dismissed, and Callagy has not yet presented any ground for dismissal. His paper is a vanity. He has given no rationale why Glendora's complaint should be dismissed with or without prejudice. Callagy must be dismissed with prejudice from shareholders' treasury. He is costing us our dividends. And Callagy is omega before alpha. Alpha is the default, and Bennett and Amato chose. So now Callagy wants Glendora to be enjoined from filing any more lawsuits